Hey everyone. Today I'm joined by Dr. Arturo Munoz, who is a senior adjunct political analyst at the RAND Corporation and a former senior CIA officer with over 29 years of experience in the Directorate of Intelligence and the Directorate of Operations as an operations officer. Dr. Munoz participated in multiple counterterrorism, counterinsurgency, and narcotics operations worldwide. His expertise ranges from counterterrorism, covert action, psyops, and Afghanistan to U.S. foreign and regional policies. Dr. Munoz holds a BA in History and Spanish Literature from Loyola University and MA in Anthropology and PhD in History from Stanford University. I also want to mention that everything Arturo says in this interview is his personal view and not the view of the United States government and is not endorsed by the government. And with that, I'm going to switch over to the interview. Thanks. Hope you all enjoy it. All right, Arturo, it's great to be speaking with you today. Thank you for
Right.
thank you
Same
for
here.
joining.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I guess right off the bat, I mean, obviously a very impressive CV. I'm wondering, just as we're jumping into the conversation, how your experience as an operations officer in the CIA, which also known as a case officer, how has that shaped your perspective on the world as you see it? What do you say?
Well, it shapes it a lot because, I had two experiences at the agency and they're complementary. And I'm not unique. I mean, other people have also done it, but it's not the pattern. It's not what most people do, which is I was started in the DI as an intelligence analyst.
Which is the director of
Which
intelligence.
now is the DA, the director of it used to be the director of intelligence. Now they changed the name to director of analysis. The same thing, they just different name.
Yeah.
And then I switched after 4 years. I switched to the director of operations. And then I became an operations officer, and then I became certified as a case officer, which means you can recruit. You're authorized to recruit. So both experiences, being an intelligence analyst and reading the intelligence reports from the field, and then comparing that to what you read in the newspapers, then you see, well, that the story's incomplete. All
Right.
right. There's other details here that people are not mentioning. And then when you become an ops officer and a case officer, and then you're actually dealing directly with people who are making the news, all right, then you get a different perspective. It becomes personal. You actually get a feeling for the personalities of the people involved. And one thing that you can come away with, a lot of times we give an explanation. Well, they do this because of their political beliefs or their religious beliefs.
Yeah.
And then when you talk to them, you say, no, they're not motivated by religion or even any political ideology. It's something totally different.
So you have
Uh,
like a much more dispassionate view of people.
well, yeah, yes, more dispatch. Yes, absolutely, more dispassionate, but
And in many
also,
ways, like more empathetic even, right? You
and
see their perspective.
and I would argue more empathetic as well. You see their perspective because you have to. I mean, I don't think you can be a good case officer if you don't see uh, things through their eyes, because you have to establish a relationship. You can't just say, "Hey, come and help the U.S. and I'll give you a bunch of money." That's you're gonna get. That's not good. You don't get good cooperation that way. I mean, you have to present it as, "Hey, I'm going to help you do what you want to do. I want to help you achieve your objectives."
Yeah.
Um, and that's where you get a good relationship, where you have a meeting of minds. But you got to understand their mind, and you got to understand more than their mind. You got to understand their emotions and their psychology.
Right. So you're really seeing kind of the human face of what becomes history.
I would say so. Yes.
Yeah. I gotta say, it's intriguing what you said about when you look at the newspaper, you see an incomplete picture. And I'm wondering if you can kind of expound on that, obviously without, you know, getting into any sensitive information that you can't discuss. But can you just kind of give a picture for how is the picture incomplete? Like what's missing, things like that. Just kind of paint a picture of what's
Uh,
missing from the painting.
well, what's we tend to stereotype people, and because it's just human nature. When I say we, I don't mean just Americans. I mean all human beings
Yeah.
engage in stereotyping because it's easy, and you got to make sense of the world. And stereotyping is a way to um to understand the world.
Yeah.
And then, for example, with uh, people we define as terrorists, all right, I've actually talked to a number of terrorists. I mean, actual terrorists, not people we call terrorists because we don't
Right.
like them, all right, or we want to have an excuse to operate against them, so we call them terrorists. No, I mean actual terrorists who did do terrorist actions. All right, genuine, real terrorists. All right, and what I have found out is two things. Some of them are actually very intellectual, and they give you all these explanations as to why they do what they do, and they're very concerned, for example, to conform to their strictures of right and wrong. For example, I had a conversation with a terrorist about 9/11. And I said, now this is an Islamic terrorist. Now, I don't want to give the idea that all terrorists are Muslims. All right. There's lots of other terrorists who are not Muslims.
Yeah.
But these actually, in the first terrorist bombing, I think it was in the suicide bombing was actually started. Well, some people debate who were the first ones, but one of the early ones was actually Sri Lanka, and the war between the Tamils and the what's the other group there, the Tamils and the Sinhala.
Yeah. Yeah.
So they pioneered, at suicide bombings, and then the Muslims said, "Hey, that's a good idea. Let's do that." But in other words, there's a lot of cross cultural, activity going on here. But to get back to how you see terrorists different when you actually talk to them, they actually this Islamic terrorist, all right,
Which
uh,
you've been, the United States has been confronting kind
which
of
we've been confronting for decades.
for yeah.
Well, there's two things that I would say. One is that they have their version of the Quran and the Hadith, which they believe is the correct version. Now, moderate Muslim religious leaders say, no, they're wrong. That's not what the Quran says. This is not the lessons of the Hadith. All right. You are wrong.
Sure.
But the terrorists themselves don't accept that. No, we are right. You are wrong. Okay. So there's a division there as to how you interpret the Quran and how you interpret the teachings. So, according to the teachings of the Quran, according to the way the terrorists interpret it, which is different from the way the moderates interpret it, they feel completely justified. And they will cite, Quranic verses, all right, to justify themselves. Now, the moderates will say, you're taking it out of context. That's not the right interpretation. They don't agree. No, this is the right interpretation. All right. But the thing that struck me in a conversation that I had with one terrorist is I told him, well, I've read the Quran too. And I've read it in Spanish and in English. I can't read Arabic. And so I don't have the best, exposure to it, but I have some exposure. Plus, I have talked to a lot of imams and Malavis, the higher ranking Islamic
Yeah.
clerics, and they will tell you, no, you're not supposed to kill innocent civilians. All right, and they will cite you Quranic verses. Don't do it. This is against. This is not just war according to Islamic teaching. And then they would say, no, you're wrong, and that they're wrong. But the interesting thing is, because this guy it's interesting, he had an MA in Islamic law, and he was actually well read. And he said, well, you do it too. We're not different than you. He says, when you go to war, you destroy civilians. And
Yeah.
he specifically mentioned Hiroshima and Nagasaki. He says, you blew up 2 entire cities. How can you point your finger at us? We just blew up one building in New York City. You know, we did the World Trade Center. That's a building. You guys
Yeah.
flattened 2 entire cities.
And what do you think of that perspective?
And then you did the fire bombing of Tokyo,
Yeah.
which some people would say was even worse in
Sure.
terms of human death and destruction,
And the bombing of Dresden
and
and
the bombing of Dresden. So you guys kill civilians uh, all the time. When you're waging war, well, we're waging war against you. So
yeah.
we're killing civilians. And then
But
I
I,
said,
I
go
think
ahead.
today the firebombing of Tokyo, the bombing of Dresden, those would be considered to be against international law today, wouldn't they?
That's debatable.
Yeah.
That's debatable, but I don't want to get sidetracked. Let's just go
Yeah,
along with this
yeah,
guy's interpretation
yeah,
because we're going to
yeah,
get sidetracked.
yeah,
All
totally.
right. Okay. So what I said is, arguing back with him, I says, look, intent is an issue in Islamic law as it is in Western law. A lot of people in the West, we don't understand that. But in Sharia, it just like in Western law, there's a lot of similarities. They come from the same Judeo-Christian Muslim tradition.
Yeah,
All of it, these are the well springs of all 3 religions.
yeah, it's all the
All right.
Abrahamic God. Yep.
Right. So all 3 religions have the same foundation. And then it influences the culture, by the way. So and government and law. So our law is intent is a critical issue, and when you're defining an act, okay. Now the intent of the firebombing of Tokyo and the intent of Hiroshima and Nagasaki was not that we wanted to kill Japanese civilians. All right. The intent was we wanted to destroy the military power of Japan. We wanted to destroy their ability, their infrastructure to resist a U.S. invasion because we were planning to invade Japan. And the prognosis was we would have lost 1 million soldiers, all right, would have been killed, and many more millions of Japanese soldiers and civilians would have been killed. Many, many, many more. I mean, the U.S. invasion of Japan would have been a disaster for everybody.
Yeah. I mean
So
that's the case made for
the
like
argument.
Nagasaki and Hiroshima, but I think the firebombing of Tokyo was just to destroy Tokyo. And the bombing of Dresden was revenge for I think the German bombing of London.
Well, but yes, but I don't want to get sidetracked on that.
Okay. Yeah.
Again,
Just
sticking with this guy's argument and me
yeah.
arguing with this guy, the issue of intent, because what's important here is what he said. Okay.
Yeah.
And he said, and see, I hadn't heard this before. He said, well, when we attacked the World Trade Center and the Pentagon, all right, our intent wasn't to kill civilians. All right. They're collateral damage, just like you. All right. They were a means to an end, but they weren't the end. All right. And he said, if you guys can blow up a whole city to achieve your, you know, military objective, and even in the cases that you mentioned, Dresden and Tokyo, you could argue there was a military objective, all right, to further the end of the war. All
Yeah.
right. Well, that's why we did what we did in 9/11. We had a military objective. We are at war with you. You know, we think you're attacking Islam and attacking Islamic countries, and you need to be resisted. This was the best resistance. And
Right.
then he said, then he goes more, he explains it. He says, by your argument, the one I was making, we should have attacked the military base. All right. Now, with all the military power that you have, all right, we would have been eliminated in 5 minutes. Okay. Because we don't have
Yeah.
the military capability that you have. So, sure, we could have gone against some military target and it would have lasted 5 minutes and we would have been eliminated, given the small number of people and the fact they didn't have weapons or anything. It would have been suicide. Okay. Now they did commit suicide, but they want to make their suicide count. So they said, so we didn't go after a military target. We went after a civilian target, a soft target, because that would have been, because we could do it, that we can do, that we can get through your defenses and do it, one, and would have a tremendous psychological impact, which it did. I mean, it was a very
Yeah.
successful terrorist attack. You can't deny that. Everybody agrees with that. And if what they wanted to do was terrify the population, they did it. And if they wanted to make a big splash worldwide, look what we can do to the U.S. in their country, they did it. Now, I don't think the consequences were what they had in mind. I don't think that at all. I
Right.
think they really miscalculated on that one.
Right.
But their intent was what this guy spelled out. He says, so therefore, we didn't have the intent of killing civilians just for the sake of killing civilians. No, that would be wrong, and that's sick.
Yeah.
No, we are warriors. We are jihadist warriors, and we do things for a reason, and it is justified by our religion. All right. And then he said one more thing that struck me, talking about 9/11. He said, you guys, when you do your bombings, and then in the past, you know, the World War II example, but bringing it up to the present, to Iraq, when we did shock and awe bombings in Iraq and that kind of a thing, and in Afghanistan, where we did bombings in Afghanistan, he said, your pilots, you know, return to their base and they have a drink. Okay. And by the tenor of his comments, he meant an alcoholic drink. And we, on the other hand, we are more noble than you. That's what he said, because we die with our victims. We share death with our victims, but you don't. You kill people and you fly away. And I didn't say anything, but I was thinking in the back of my head, yeah, okay, because my own dad was a bomber in the Korean War,
Yeah.
and he did do, uh, you know, bombing raids in North Korea. And knowing my dad, and actually they took a lot of casualties, you know, because I studied his unit, his squadron, and they were flying B-29s in the Korean War. He
Yeah.
was the navigator in a B-29. And knowing my dad, and they had the horrendous, you know, aerial battles and all kinds of, you know, dangerous, you know, bombing runs over enemy territory, but he made it. All right. He didn't get shot down. Others
Yeah.
did, many others did. But knowing my dad, you know, the rest of his life, I'm sure when he got back to base, he had a drink. All right. There's no question. He went to the officers club and had a drink. I know my dad. I can't believe he wouldn't have done it.
Yeah.
All
Yeah.
right. So I'm thinking, little does this jihadist knows he's talking about my dad. All right. But I didn't say anything. But
Yeah.
that is the kind of human experience that you can only get in the CIA. When does anybody get to talk at that level with the CIA? Now, one reason why the guy agreed to talk to me is because I had read the Koran, and I did know his frame of reference. And I'm talking to him in terms of his frame of reference. And so then I'm worth talking to.
Yeah.
All right. If I'm a complete, you know, gringo that doesn't know anything, then I'm not worth talking to. So it's a combination of the CIA provided the opportunity, but then you have to do your homework too. You got to work at it yourself.
Yeah. Well, it's such a great point you're making. That's, so much of what drives conflict in the world or disagreement are just two opposing interests, right?
Well, sure. Well, two opposing views of the world and opposing views of what's right and what's wrong.
Yeah. Yeah. So I guess, so one of the things you're saying you're missing from the newspaper is a deep understanding of the other side's perspective. But I think, yeah,
Well, yeah.
yeah. And I think you're also probably missing a number of events, actions, relationships that are driving events behind the scenes or kind of,
Oh, well, yeah.
yeah. Are you able to talk to that at all?
Well, I can't
I know you
discuss
can't get into, but just
classified
kind of
information. I can't.
thematically. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, when you read the newspaper today and
Well, I'm
you're,
always thinking, what are the behind the scenes thing? Because when you're in the CIA, that's what you focus on is
yeah,
the behind the scenes. Your
right.
life is behind the scenes,
Yeah.
but
And like, I mean,
I
you
don't
can't
want
you can't get into specifics, obviously, but how much of the picture do you feel like you're missing in the newspaper? Um, you know, just yeah, if you can just give some idea of like how much we're missing or just hypothetically what could be missing, things like that.
well, I think we're missing all kinds of behind the scenes negotiations about all the major things that we're going to talk about later
Yeah.
on. The
Yeah.
Ukraine, Gaza, China. There's all kinds of Saudi Arabia. There's obviously uh, behind the scene things that led up to the big confrontation between Zelensky and Trump and the vice president, and that scene at the White House.
Yeah.
That just didn't erupt just out of nowhere. And see, to the viewer, I think people were kind of shocked at this tremendous confrontation between the president of an allied country, or I don't even know what we can call them allies, but a friendly country, and the president of the United States and the vice president, and all of a sudden it just blows up on the screen. Well, I would assume, I don't know, okay,
Yeah.
but I would assume that there's all kinds of behind the scenes things that led up to it.
Yeah. And so all that kind of falls under the rubric of, I guess, diplomatic relationships and diplomatic communications.
Well, yeah, the diplomacy is highly personalistic.
Yeah.
I mean, international leaders like each other, and some international leaders don't like each other, and
Sure.
that actually influences foreign policy.
Sure. How much does it actually influence foreign policy? Because I mean, these leaders largely are representing their nations, their regimes, and representing kind of raw interests in most cases. No, and
Yeah,
those
sure.
would supersede personal relationships or any kind of feelings they have
Um,
toward one another.
yeah, theoretically, yeah, you're
Theoretically,
absolutely right. Theoretically, they should. In an ideal world, people should be rational, all right,
yeah,
and do things to promote their own national interests, and actually be briefed by intelligence analysts before you go to any international meeting, where you get a sharp idea of what's going on and what they want, what we want, what are they willing to accept, what is our basic interest here, what do we really want.
yeah,
I mean, what do we really want in the Democratic Republic of the Congo? Cobalt, right?
right,
So keep that in mind when you're, at doing whatever you're doing with diplomatically. What is your objective? Cobalt.
yeah,
All right. When Zelensky's meeting with us, what does he want? He wants missiles. All right, keep
Yeah.
that in mind, what you really want. And the Russians are the same way. What do they really want? The US to, bug off.
Right.
All right.
Yeah.
So, but are people, do they act that way? No, there's all kinds of personal interactions that go on, personal likes and dislikes that greatly affect how you pursue your own national interest.
And have you seen that in your career where kind of personal relationships help or hinder a
Sure,
deal getting done?
absolutely. And
Yeah. Is there anything you could
there's a
talk about
whole
there?
but I can't get into,
Yeah, it's all classified.
yeah.
Yeah. I'm wondering, speaking of classified, I'm wondering how much the role of covert activity drives world events. I mean,
That's a good one.
you know,
Uh,
and I'm
Go ahead.
again not asking you to kind
No,
of speak to
I got it, in
yeah,
general, in general.
yeah, yeah,
Um, I think it's case by case. There are some situations where you can make the argument, uh, clandestine intelligence collection and then which is different than covert activity. They're two separate
yeah,
activities. They're
yeah,
both clandestine, but one is you're just acquiring, FI, all right, and the other one is CA, covert action. Now they should be closely related, obviously, but they're two separate things. But you can argue that there are some situations where FI and CA were critical, all right, were critical to the outcome. And yet there's other situations where you could say they had no impact at all because the national leaders of either country just dismissed the FI. I don't believe it. You're wrong. Or they didn't want to do the covert action. All right. Or what sometimes happen is they do want to do the covert action, but it doesn't work because the
yeah,
conditions for success just weren't there. I mean, there are many covert actions that don't work. All right. And it's not because the people doing it are stupid. No, it's just because the environment in that country and the situation in that country is just not auspicious for that. Now, if it is auspicious, then it works great. So, in other words, there's different factors at play.
yeah.
And so sometimes your covert action, it did a great job and really changed history, and sometimes it doesn't.
And so, would it be more more auspicious for covert action in less developed countries or war zones, or even open democracies, as opposed to countries like China or Russia or North Korea, where you have a high degree of surveillance and they're kind of denied areas?
Oh, yeah, definitely. Well, intelligence collection and FI and CA are
Yeah,
obviously more difficult in a totalitarian country. And part of it is because they're perfectly aware of FI and CA because they do it, and
yeah,
they're constantly doing it themselves. And they constantly assume that we're doing it to them. So they take all kinds of precautions. I mean, you take China. The internet in China is not like the internet in the rest of the world. They've got
yeah,
all, they call it the Great Firewall of China. You can penetrate it. I've read all these reports by all these hackers and all these computer geeks. We can do it. We can do it. Okay, but it's unusual. All right,
yeah. Well,
it's
it's interesting because
hard
you
to
can
penetrate.
also use VPN to access the internet in
Well,
China
there's
and do
all
that.
kinds of techniques you can do, but
Yeah, but then
but you're
the other thing
talking
is
about
that's
millions of
inconsistent. Like
people.
sometimes,
Millions of people are not doing VPN. All that stuff you're talking about, millions of people don't do it.
yeah, but the government also knows, obviously, as we all, that people are using VPN, and sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't work. So it's it even that's a
But
mixed
but
bag.
but but there's always exceptions to everything. You can't make a categorical statement. There's always an exception. Well, you can make a categorical statement, and then you ought to caveat it. Well, except,
Yeah,
but
yeah,
the my point is that in general, You can't do internet operations in China the way you can do it in the rest of the world because the Chinese have made a conscious, deliberate decision. We're going to block our internet from the rest of the world, and we're only going to let in what we allow.
And
And
by
they have,
internet operations, you mean psychological operations like
no,
social
no,
media
no. I mean
campaigns?
access to the internet. No, no. Psychological operations, yeah, that takes place on the internet, but also
Yeah.
takes place in many other ways.
Yeah.
So, to me, that's a different thing. I'm just talking about access to the internet. All right.
So would
And,
that be
and
like a cyber attack that you're talking about?
excuse me?
Would that be like a cyber attack that you're talking
No,
about?
I'm talking about the firewall. They have created the firewall of China so that most users, most, do not have access to the internet outside
Yeah.
of China.
Yeah, so
What
I
I'm
guess what
talking
I'm asking is what is an internet operation though? If it's not a psychological operation, if it's not a cyber attack, what's an internet operation?
Oh, an internet operation can be anything. It can be what they do, the denial of use operation. You
Yeah.
know, that's not that is that a psychological? It depends how you want to define it. Because denial of use, you flood a website with questions so that shuts down. All right, I guess I would call that cyber war. I guess.
Yeah,
I,
yeah,
I
that's
don't
kind of
know
a
that
low
I would
grade
call
cyber
that
attack.
a psychological operation. What's a
No.
psychological operation? Bots.
Yeah, that's a
All
denial
right,
of service
bots
attack.
that post messages. You know,
Yeah.
one of the things
So
was
you're
gonna.
saying that the NSA can't get through the Great Firewall?
I assume it could, but on a limited, specific basis, but I really don't know.
Yeah.
I
Yeah,
don't.
yeah,
I
yeah.
am not a cyber warfare specialist.
Yeah, that's fair. That's
I'm a
fair.
dilettante when it
Yeah.
comes to cyber warfare.
Yeah, me
All right.
too. I would think that they could probably get anywhere they want to get. I would think.
I would hope so, but
I would hope,
you're
yeah.
asking the wrong guy. I don't know.
Yeah,
I hope
fair.
so. I
All
hope
right.
they do.
So,
Go for it, NSA. Penetrate the wall. Do it.
yeah.
Can they do it? How should I know? I don't know.
Yeah. No, that's funny. So okay, so given all your experience, I'm wondering how do you kind of broadly see the world today?
Oh, so we're getting into the issue
The
of
state of the world.
the
Yeah.
state of the world. Um, it's there's positive and there's negative. I would actually want to emphasize the negative more than the positive. And I had actually looked about looked at all kinds of stuff that's been written. Um, the thing that I wanted to emphasize the most, in addition to all kinds of other things, is the concept of international law. I mean, there's other things that are more, because I actually been reading, in preparation for this podcast.
Yeah.
So I've been reading a lot about
Thank
that
you.
issue, and a lot of people mention, interestingly, climate. All right, climate change. That we just don't want to focus on it, but it's real, and now there are several different disparate things that don't that in and of themselves are not related to each other, but they come together to answer your question. Where do we see
Yeah.
the world?
Yeah.
Well, let's start with I do want to talk about international law, but let me talk about climate change first because
Yeah.
it's just so visible. It's so obvious to me because a lot of people, deny it. No, these are just regular cycles, etc. That the glaciers are melting, so what? They'll freeze up again, and now they're melting. 100 years from now, they'll freeze.
Right.
So now maybe they're right. Maybe it's a cyclical thing. All right. Maybe the human impact is not as great as we think it is. Maybe. But it is undeniable that climate change is having a destabilizing impact right now.
For sure.
Okay. And all the projections from all the scientists are it's going to get worse over the next, you know, few years
Yeah.
and maybe over the next many years. Okay. But at least now it's having an impact. And I'll give you an example that I just found out about recently. And I think most people don't know it. But you know that they're talking about evacuating the capital of Iran, Tehran.
No, I did not know that.
You know why?
No.
For lack of water,
Wow.
because Iran has had a drought for years, and their wells and their dams are drying up. Their rivers are drying up. Iran, which is a place that we normally don't think of as a climate change case, is having a tremendous time to the point where they are seriously discussing evacuating the city of Iran because they are running out of water. They just will not have enough water for all the millions of people that live there. So they're going to move the capital.
Yeah.
Now that you want an example of climate change and how it affects the society and government and economy? I think moving your capital city because you ran out of water. And this has nothing to do with nothing. This is
Yeah.
pure climate change. This is the Israelis, Americans, terrorists. No, 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 it has nothing to do with it.
Yeah.
It
Definitely.
it's simple. You're running out of water. Okay. Another example: Saharan Africa, the Sahel. The Sahel, you know, another. Well, I guess it's part of this conversation about instability and everything else.
Yeah.
The most, yeah, I was looking up at the Global Peace Index. Okay. And in 2024, there was more instability than ever before. You know, and answering your question, where are we going? Well, you look at sources then, because you just don't want to talk out of the top of your head, right? So let's look at the Global Peace Index. Where are we going? Worse. All right. Now, where is one of now the obvious cases? Okay, the Ukraine, they're having a full blown war. That's obvious. Okay. Gaza, that's very obvious. But there's other places also. And sub-Saharan Africa has got all kinds of civil wars and coups and forced migration.
Yeah.
And a lot of that, getting back to the original theme, has to do with climate change, with the desertification, the spread of the deserts. A lot of land that was arable now is not. You know, the spread of the deserts.
Yeah.
All right.
Well, there's also an argument that the Arab Spring itself was a result of climate change because of a drought that caused crop shortages that year, and the Arab Spring started with you know the guy who owned the food cart, and so
Yeah,
business was really
yeah.
bad
I
that
was
year because
in
of the drought in Tunisia,
uh
I think, right?
Tunisia.
Yeah,
It was in Tunisia, the guy in the fruit cart. And well, I didn't know that, but there's many other examples.
yeah,
You know, another example when we were doing family separation here of immigrants during the first Trump administration, some of the children that were separated from their parents didn't speak Spanish. Okay, what did they speak? Maya, because they're from the Guatemalan highlands that had a drought. And a lot of the Maya corn farmers from the Western highlands, their crops had failed several years in a row. So they were actually facing starvation. So that's why so for the first time, you had a significant number of Maya Indians, you know, leaving the Western highlands and coming to the United States, you know, because they thought that was the best way to survive.
yeah,
So that's why you get all these Maya speaking children on the US border. But that was a result of a drought in the Western highlands and the failure of the corn crops.
yeah. No, I mean, I think you're 100% right. I think the climate might be the most serious threat that we face, um, because and it's 100% happening. And, you know, I think 100% humans are contributing to that. Although, when I was a kid, I mean, I remember, you know, in the 90s in grade school, we would hear all these stories about the what the state of the world would be in the 21st century. And I think a lot of those predictions haven't panned out, but there's clearly um, degradation happening and rising sea levels. And it's, I think getting harder to uh, survive in this world. And there are other things like there's the Doomsday Glacier in Antarctica, which is in the process of melting. And when this one piece melts, an ice sheet the size of Florida is gonna
Great.
yeah, flow into it's gonna slide into the ocean. And that alone, I think, would raise sea levels by 3 or 4 feet.
Yeah, and there's already the island nation of
The Maldives.
well, no, not that one, Naatu or something like that. I'm
Okay.
I'm saying it wrong. I think it's Naatu, but they're actually sinking. I mean, they're actually in danger of they're gonna have to leave
Yeah.
because of the rising sea level. Because 'cause they're like on atolls. They're very low to they're basically at sea level.
Yeah.
So they can't tolerate, a couple of feet. Now we had a rising water level a couple of years ago in a big storm in New York City, and it flooded the subways. You remember that?
Yeah. Yeah.
We were there.
Superstorm San that wasn't even a hurricane, by the way.
What was it?
I think it was just a strong storm. I don't even think it was a
Well,
tropical storm.
right, and then the metro flooded, or some of it flooded.
Yeah.
So what does that portend for the future?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, if you want my opinion, I think unless we reverse it, I mean, obviously coastal cities are just gonna be flooded, right?
Well, and like in North Carolina, that famous area with the beach area where the storms come and destroy the houses, and you got all these videos on TV, all these houses, Cape Hatteras and all that. Uh, is it Cape Hatteras? Is that North Carolina? Or I got the
I don't know. Cape Hatteras?
no, I
Let's
think that's
see.
in New England, is it?
No, it's in
Where's
North Carolina. Yeah, you're
it's in
right.
North Carolina?
Yep, Cape
Yeah, well,
Hatteras.
that area where they build a lot of houses on the strip of beach, and then they get destroyed all the time, and then they rebuild it, and then the argument is, should we be rebuilding these houses in this strip of beach?
Right. Well, they're definitely not getting insurance for those houses, so I don't
Yeah,
know who's
they're not gonna
rebuilding them.
yeah, well,
Yeah.
so the other part of, the climate change issue, so you have crop failures, you have rising seas, you have droughts, but you also have more intense, typhoons and hurricanes. Because a lot of times they're saying it's the storm of the century, and then next year they have it again, so, I mean, the centuries are being compressed.
Yeah.
The hurricanes are more intense than before, and they say, "Well, why is that?" Because the sea level, the seawater is warmer, and the warmer seawater produces a more violent hurricane, so they're more destructive.
Yeah.
In the Caribbean and in the southern US, we've had a whole series of very destructive hurricanes. But also in Asia, you have typhoons that are extremely destructive. Now, they've always had typhoons, but the issue that I've been reading is that they are more destructive than before. You've always had flooding, but the floods are more devastating than before. You had one a couple of years ago in Pakistan, which
Yeah.
was completely unprecedented.
Yeah, I remember that.
Flooded
Yeah.
huge areas and ruined all kinds of crops. It was a disaster. So there's no question that the climate change is having a negative impact. It's destabilizing. So what is happening from
And I think there's a lot of flooding in Gaza right now too.
in Gaza?
Yeah.
Good grief. Okay, I didn't know that. The immigration. This is related to the issue of immigration. So a lot of people from some sub-Saharan Africa are leaving. And where do they want to go to? Europe. Well, Europe now has got the high unemployment. Europe has got all kinds of, economic problems and labor, all kinds of issues. they really can't absorb a huge, uh, influx of immigrants from Africa and the Middle East. And then you see all these boats, they take off from Algeria. Is it Algeria? Libya.
Yeah.
Libya. Now it's more so Libya,
Yeah.
because basically Libya is a failed state. All right, you get two Libyan governments, Tripoli, and then you get the other one, in Eastern Libya. Um,
So that yeah, what's
yeah, we should be precise here. It's
yeah.
Eastern Libya. It's the Roman colony of Cyrenaica. They've basically gone back to the Roman organization where you had two provinces there,
Yeah, wasn't that the city that
where they had the consulate.
right, where there was the US originally stopped Gaddafi's forces in like 20 what 2010
Where
or
we've
2011 or
intervened. Well, I
something?
know NATO intervened too. Anyway,
Yeah.
there's two governments in Libya. So then the people smugglers take advantage of that.
Benghazi, right?
Benghazi, of course,
Benghazi.
Benghazi.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you can see all these pictures of all these boats full of Africans and Middle Eastern refugees, just but overflowing with people. And then a lot of time the boats overturn, everybody drowns. It's a disaster. But you get this flow of people, trying to reach Europe because they're desperate.
Yeah.
And the question arises, well, can Europe absorb them? Do they have the economic, and social infrastructure to absorb masses of immigrants, fleeing, uh, their home countries? And we're only talking about countries fleeing the effects of climate change. The other issue is all the wars they're having, all the civil wars. And
Yeah.
that's where the Global Peace Index, they actually said there's 156 conflicts in 2024 in the world. And this is way more than when they started measuring conflict in 2008. So
Okay.
from 2008 to 2024, they have noticed a sharp spike in conflict.
Do you know what the percent increase is?
Uh, it, it, I read it, but I forgot what it is.
All right, let me
If you look up Global Peace Index 2024,
yeah, 175% increase in internationalized intrastate conflicts since
wow,
2010.
well, that's pretty big.
That's pretty big. Yeah, so
That's
that's
pretty significant. I mean,
almost triple. Yeah.
yeah. So if you're discussing the issue of where are we going, and these are
Yeah,
people
and
that
there was still like quite a lot of war in 2010.
yeah, but they're saying there's more now,
Yeah.
and they make a distinction between internal war and war across borders,
Yeah.
and they say both have increased.
Yeah.
And you look at Africa, Cameroon, I had a conflict. I hesitate to say if it was a coup or a civil war or a rebellion because I haven't followed it, but let's just say they have a conflict,
Yeah.
but politically motivated conflict. Um, what's the place over there by Zanzibar? Anyway, there's a bunch of, and then you get the Democratic Republic, and you get Nigeria,
Yeah. And
and
Sudan.
then anyway, there's a whole bunch of countries.
Yeah.
Mozambique, that's the other one. Mozambique has a civil uprising, a guerrilla war. Mozambique,
Yeah. Yeah.
Cameroon, Mali. All right, they
Yeah.
have an Al Qaeda affiliated terrorist, insurgent,
Yeah.
movement that
Well, and
is
there were a lot of US troops in Mali as well.
uh, okay. And
Yeah, I mean,
they got a
well,
lot of work to do. They got plenty of activity to engage in.
yeah. Well,
And
during Trump's first term, I think some US troops were killed in Mali.
I think I know they were killed. I don't remember the country, but yes, they were killed because Niger is also having problems.
Yeah,
All
yeah.
right, and but I want to actually focus on Nigeria, okay, because of the reaction of the people, and I think this actually explains. If you want to summarize, we don't have time to go into every African country, and I'm not the guy to do it. I'm not that well informed. I just know they're having conflict.
Yeah,
And I know a lot of it is politically motivated,
yeah.
struggle for power between different tribes, between different national leaders, and so on. But to me, the case that's most interesting is Nigeria for the following reason. They did it again. The rebels kidnapped a bunch of school children. All right.
And
Now
this is Boko Haram in
this is
Nigeria?
well, I think it's Boko Haram, but it doesn't even matter.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
Because these insurgent groups change names. But yeah, it may be Boko Haram, but for my point, it doesn't matter. They're
yeah,
rebels,
yeah.
and they went to a Catholic school and kidnapped the schoolgirls. Okay, here's the point: the parents are complaining against their own government, and they're saying this shouldn't happen. The government should be providing security to our children, to our families. We should be able to trust in the government. And that's my point, that what you're seeing across the whole continent is a failure of government. All right. And I don't want to go so far as to call them failed states, but they are failing in the essential function of providing security. All right. And I think when you have that situation, then people start to get radical and they say, well, then we need to overthrow the government. We need another government. We need a new kind of government. Or what is most common, we need a dictator who's going to impose order.
Yeah.
All right. Actually, I talked to some Taliban. I asked them why did you become a Taliban? And it was interesting. None of them said, "Oh, our religion." They didn't give a religious reason at all. You know what they said? They said because after the civil war in Afghanistan, when the Mujahideen drove out the pro-Russian government. The pro-Russian government fell. All right. The Russian troops withdrew. All right. Well, the victorious Mujahideen, did they all sit together and create a democratic, all-inclusive government? No, they started fighting amongst each other for power.
Right.
You had the Tajiks versus the Pashtuns, you had the Hazaras, all these groups and all these warlords. All right. And they were all competing for power and they had a hellacious civil war amongst themselves
Yeah.
after the Russians left. And I was told that there was more destruction in Kabul by the Afghans themselves during their civil war than during when the Russians were there. All right. Because in
Wow.
those days, when I first went there were whole sections of Kabul that were in ruins from fighting.
Yeah.
All right. And they said,
Yeah.
our fellow Afghans did that. It wasn't the Russians. All
Wow.
right. Just to show you how bad it was.
Yeah.
So that you had all kinds of tribal militias and just bandits would stop people on the road, all right, and rob them and kidnap people. So you had kidnappings, you had robbery, you had extortion, you had fighting between different bands. And it to a degree that it was a lot worse than when the Russians were there.
Yeah. Is
So,
part of that because the Russians basically controlled Kabul when they were there?
well, the Russians controlled Kabul, but I think the reason why, but the Russians control Kabul, but I don't think we need to dismiss the role of the Afghan communists
Yeah.
because the Afghan communists actually were well organized and they had a very powerful ideology, which was we need to modernize. All these ancient customs are holding us back. And by the way, Islam is holding us back. All right.
Yeah.
We want to be modern. We want to be scientific. And one thing
That's
that
super
the
interesting.
Afghan communists were very big on women's rights,
Right.
educating women.
Right.
All right. And but it was a strong native movement. So it wasn't just the Russians went there. There was a lot of Afghans that wanted what the Russian communists offered.
Yeah.
Now, see, that's good imperialism, right? When the local people want what you offer. All right. But what's the problem? A lot more local people didn't want what you offer.
Yeah.
Okay. That's the problem.
Yeah.
Most Afghans didn't want it. Now, what happened was the Afghans that didn't want it and threw out the Russians and threw out the Afghan communists. They couldn't agree. Okay. But the reason I'm saying all this, you had the big power struggle between the Mujahideen, and life just became intolerable for a lot of Afghans. So I remember the one mullah who had just received his turban. That's a special turban that they use when you become a Malawi, and he had just returned from a madrasa in Pakistan. He was on the bus going back to uh, yeah, his hometown in Kandahar province somewhere, and some tribal militia stopped the bus, and they kidnapped some women off the bus. They robbed everybody, and he talked to him. He said, "But don't you recognize my turban? You know, I'm a Malawi." And he said, "Who cares what you are? Give us your watch, all right? And be happy we don't cut your throat. Shut up, all
Wow.
right?"
Yeah.
And so they robbed everybody in the bus, including the Malawi. And that's when he said, "Okay, this has got to end. We need to impose order on this country, and it has to be Islamic order. And we're going to impose Sharia. We're going to end this. All this robbery, all this extortion, all this rape has to end." That's why they did it.
Yeah.
All right. They want to impose order. And I think that's a natural human reaction to crisis. So I can foresee a lot of dictatorships popping up if they're not popping up already, because that's normally who people turn to when they're under stress.
Yeah. 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 When I lived in China, that's what people would tell me. They would say like, yeah, you Americans care about freedom and da 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 in China. And they had gone through kind of the Cultural Revolution, the Great Leap Forward, and everyone told me they would say, all we care about is order. And this was back in 2006.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and you think most of this rise in conflict in kind of the developing world is a result of climate change?
No, no, no. I didn't say that at all.
Okay.
I said climate change is a factor.
Yeah.
All right. But I said that in all human events, the way I see it, there's multiple factors.
And so what are some of the other
Uh,
factors kind of just broadly?
since you ask,
Yeah.
I think one of the things that I see in the world is a lessening, a weakening of the consensus of the rules. All right. And what I'm seeing is you get a lot of prominent nations breaking the rules and just getting away with it. And I just think that has a demoralizing impact on the rest of the world. You know, and this goes across the board. Okay. Let's start with one example, the South China Sea. The 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 Chinese have decided that they're going to expand control over the South China Sea, and the way they're doing it is they're dredging up uh, uh, reefs and creating artificial islands, and then fortifying them with airstrips and with harbors for military uh, vessels. And they're
Yeah.
also using their fishing fleet. They're using their fishing fleet as an instrument of expanding their influence. So they've sent their fishing fleet to these shoals off the coast of the Philippines, and they're actually sinking. They have Chinese patrol boats that actually sunk Filipino fishing vessels. Now, these shoals are like 200 miles from the coast of China, and it's a lot. I forget the exact distance from the Philippines, but they're a lot closer to the Philippines.
Yeah,
And the
yeah. I think they're
Filipinos,
they're within the Philippines, exclusive economic zone,
well, yeah, they consider it
aren't they?
Philippine waters. The
Yeah,
Filipinos have always considered this Philippine waters, and
right.
Filipino fishermen have always gone there. But
And
now
that
the
that would
Chinese,
be like the Treaty of the Sea would be, would support that claim.
well, I'm getting at is even more
Yeah,
compelling than that. What they did is because, like I said, they're sinking uh, fishing boats. They parked the whole fishing fleet in that area to impede Filipino access and to physically establish dominance. This is
yeah,
ours. Now, why is it ours? I think during some ancient Chinese empire, somebody drew a map and said this is part of China. So they're saying, okay, look at this. We have a justification. I don't fully understand why how the Chinese justify taking over the entire South China Sea and
yeah,
cutting out everybody else that's along the border, like Vietnam, like Indonesia. What is the justification for reaching so far out? Do you know what it reminds me of in the New World context? When the Pope divided the New World between Spain and Portugal, early
yeah,
on in the 16th century.
yeah.
And I think it was the Treaty of Tordesillas, I forget.
Okay.
But basically, the Pope divided the world between Spain and Portugal. And actually, when the Spanish conquistadors first showed up in Mexico, they actually read from that, and they said, "Look,
Yeah, you're right,
the
the Treaty
Pope
of
has given us
Tordesillas.
the authority to to conquer this area." You know, I, so the Chinese are using 16th century logic, to take control over what really isn't theirs.
Yeah,
So the point is that the Filipinos took the case to the International Court of Arbitration, and the International Court of Arbitration ruled in favor of the Philippines. And they flat out told China on every count,
yeah,
and they said on every count you're wrong. This is illegal. You can't do this. This is against international law. You are in violation of international law. You must leave. And what did the Chinese say? Make us. All right. And well, not in that childish a manner, but they said, well, we don't recognize your authority. Aha. So that's the point.
right.
You have a major power that doesn't recognize the authority of an international court and does whatever it wants with impunity. All right. Another example, the Ukraine. We had a treaty when the Soviet Union broke up in Budapest, the Budapest Memorandum.
Yeah,
They in exchange for giving up its nuclear weapons, and apparently the Ukraine had the third largest arsenal of nuclear weapons. They gave it up, and in exchange, they got security guarantees from the United States, England, and Russia, where they promised to respect Ukrainian sovereignty and gave them security guarantees. And I forget that was the year of that
I think it was
2000.
like 90, 94.
Well, it was shortly after the collapse of the Soviet Union,
Yeah, 94.
94.
Yeah,
Well, in 2014, Russia just tore up that agreement when
yeah,
they took Crimea.
and we did when we did nothing.
And yeah, well, yes, that
We being the United
you
States.
well, no, and the West.
Yeah,
But in addition to the Crimea, then they did their little operation in Donbass and took over a chunk of eastern Ukraine through supposedly a covert action, but everybody knew it was Russia. So
right,
then what's covert about it? Russia just took it. You
right.
know, now they went through the motions of doing covert action because they got local people to invite them in and all that stuff, which is typical of covert action.
Yeah,
All right. But it's really Russia that took it over. Everybody knows that. So you made exactly my point. Yeah, Russia tore up the treaty. all right, tore up the agreement, but so did the United States and so did Britain, because we were bound to defend the Ukraine back then, and we didn't do it.
Yeah.
All right. So again, this is another example of international law being dismissed
Yeah.
by the great powers.
Well, talking about that and then also looking at the kind of almost tripling of global conflict since 2010. I saw something recently about I think the Pentagon ran a war game um, that looked at what would happen if the Maduro regime fell and what would the day after look like. And one of the elements was um, jockeying by Russia and China to create instability and also exert their own influence. And so I'm wondering, and we're talking about Ukraine, we're talking about the Nine Dash Line in the South China Sea and conflict over the Spratly Islands and other uh, islands claimed by the Philippines and Vietnam and others. And I'm wondering how much of a role is covert action playing in this tripling of conflict? Because a lot of these areas are areas where uh, I think the way you described it, covert action would be able to flourish pretty well. And so, how much of this is uh, being fed by great powers?
I don't, uh, in terms of the potential conflict with Venezuela, uh, yeah, the Chinese have given aid to Venezuela. The Russians have given aid to Venezuela. The ones who are very prominent there are the Cubans. You know, in the old days, in the Cold War days, you could say the Cubans are the proxy of the Russians. But I think things have changed because Russia just, doesn't have that much money. I mean, and resources. And I think it's compelling that in a place where they have, see, the way I try to look at the world the way they do, and they think very much in terms of spheres of influence.
Yeah,
And they really think that Central America and the Caribbean is the U.S. sphere of influence, and that
which goes
they
back to
are,
the Monroe Doctrine.
and well, yeah, even yeah, as articulated by the Monroe Doctrine, yes. But even without the Monroe Doctrine, the way the Russians think, it's right there. It's their doorstep, just like the Caucasus is our doorstep. All
Yeah,
right, just like the Kazakhstan and all the stands is our doorstep.
yeah. Which
Okay.
is why the FSB, their domestic security service, kind of operates there, not their foreign intelligence agencies like the SVR and the GRE.
Well, all those countries have their own intel services. Now, do they
But
cooperate with the
but
Russians?
it,
Of course.
in like I think the Russians call it their near abroad, right? Which would include Ukraine, the Baltic
Well,
states, Kazakhstan.
yes. So that's my argument.
Yeah, yeah,
But by
yeah. No,
that
I'm agreeing with
same
you.
way of thinking, they view the U.S., which has a lot of power. We've got a lot of more money and more weapons than they do.
Yeah,
All right, and we have a long history of intervention in Central America and Latin America. So it's our sphere of influence. Now, you take Cuba. I don't think that was a Russian covert action. I think Fidel did it on his own. He was a product of their own internal conflicts. He sought out the Russians,
right.
because he
But he had
wanted
Soviet
a
support.
counterweight to the United States.
Yeah,
And also, he did have some real communists in his ranks, who were anti-American from day one. So they sought the alliance with Cuba, but I mean, excuse me, with Russia. But I've never seen any evidence that Fidel Castro's rise to power and the creation of the communist state in Cuba was a Russian covert action. No, the Russians obviously supported it afterwards because, yeah, I mean, even though they said it's our sphere of influence, that they think that they're not going to pass up an opportunity. So, an opportunity lands in their lap. Well, of course they take it, and then they really exploited it, and then we get the Cuban Missile Crisis and all that. But if your question is, was that Russian covert action when they achieved power, I would say no, it wasn't. So I think the same thing about Venezuela now. Yeah, the Russians they've done some assistance, so have the Chinese. But I think both the Russians and the Chinese view this as our sphere of influence, where they are at a disadvantage. Okay, that's the important thing. They are
Yeah.
at a disadvantage. So I don't think they're going to promote anything that's going to hurt their interests. However, if we invade and we, get into an imperialist mode with Venezuela, as we have in the past in Latin, we're going to repeat Latin American history, send in the Marines and all that, like we've done before, like we did in Panama. This is kind of a replay of Panama. Call the
Yeah.
dictator a drug trafficker and then invade. So now we're setting it up. We just called the guy a dictator, a drug trafficker, and we're threatening to invade. We've done this before. We did it in Panama.
Yeah.
I don't think the Russians and the Chinese are doing anything to egg Maduro on, but, and it's a huge but, if we do invade, and if Maduro and his people can pull off what they threatened to do, which is, by the way, is what the Sandinistas threatened to do when they were threatened by U.S. invasion. The Sandinistas, going back in time, right after Grenada, when we invaded Grenada, there was talk about invading Nicaragua, to getting rid of the communist regime there. And there was even a bumper sticker, Nicaragua next. Okay.
Yeah.
So the Nicaraguans, publicly, they said, well, we can't defeat the US if they invade. All right. We'll try to cause casualties, but we will retreat. And yeah, they will take over the main cities. But then we're going to go into a guerrilla war. All right. And then we're going to fight a protracted people's war. Now we get into the communist, the good old, the Viet Cong, the Viet Minh, all those guys, yeah, we're going to do protracted popular struggle. But another way to say it, we'll fight a guerrilla war.
Yeah.
All right. And actually, the Americans actually aren't too good at that. Think about how many guerrilla war campaigns have we won? Did we win Afghanistan? No. Did we win Vietnam? No. What other guerrilla insurgencies have we crushed? I'm sure there's some if you think about it.
I
But
guess Iraq to,
I guess we crushed. Yeah, we won Iraq. But I think it's because the guerrillas didn't have widespread popular support. I mean, they can go into different reasons why. Yeah, okay, we won some, but I would argue that we're not good at it. We don't like to do it.
yeah.
All right. So if Maduro and his regime, they manage to escape into the countryside and they start a guerrilla campaign against us, then I think you will see Russian support and Chinese support just to mess with us, just to make
Yeah.
life miserable for us.
Yeah.
Not that they think they're going to win, but just to keep us tied down. Oh, that's great. The
Right.
U.S. is going to get tied down in Venezuela. Now's the time to invade Taiwan. See if the Americans are going to do a two-front war, one in Venezuela and one in Taiwan. Great, please do it. Go for it. Make my day. Invade Venezuela.
Yeah, and I bring up Venezuela because it's happening and it's big news right now. But it's also, if the Pentagon expects that to happen in Venezuela, and you see China for sure working to gain influence in South America and Central America and Mexico, and in Africa and basically everywhere in the world,
Everywhere.
really.
They
Yeah,
want to replace us.
yeah, yeah. Or definitely like massively expand their own global influence. And some of that is done in overtly with loans and trade agreements. But then I would imagine a lot of that is also done covertly.
Sure. Yes, of course.
Yeah, and so what I'm wondering is, since 2010, if you've had a tripling of conflict, almost a tripling of conflict, how much of that is being driven by great powers like China, like the United States? I guess less so Russia now since the Ukraine war is kind of consuming all of Russia's resources. But how much of that is happening sub rosa?
Well, take South Sudan, okay, as an example of the issue you're raising. How much is there sub rosa foreign, at uh, uh, promoting of these internal struggles? You read all over the place that the UAE, the United Arab Emirates, is supporting the rebel force in South Sudan. And then you ask yourself, what does anybody get out of South Sudan? Well, apparently a lot. They have gold there. Apparently gold mining is a big activity. They also have ports. Apparently there are resources there. And that's the age old thing. You support the rebel faction. Hopefully they become the government, and then they will they will pay you off by giving you trade concessions and mineral concessions. And the Chinese, it's interesting. We can't assume, yeah, they want to expand their influence, but one big difference between this Cold War that we're in now and the Cold War that we were in the past, like I guess the Soviet Union.
So you would describe this as a Cold War?
Yeah, I would not describe it. One of your questions was when we discussed this is, are we in a world war? And I say, no, we're not in a world war, because I define world war as conventional. You have conventional armies attacking each other.
Yeah.
We don't have that now, and I don't think we will over the near term. Because nobody wants it, because everybody realizes, oh, wow, once you get into that phase, look how destructive it gets. I mean, look what happened to Gaza, when they wanted to have a big war. Well, they got it, which they have been preparing for it for years with their tunnels and everything else. And now look what happened to them. So the outcome of a war is frequently not what the people thought was going to happen.
Right.
But in the difference between the Cold War that we're in now and the Cold War we were in the past, I think is significant in that in the past, there was an ideological component. The Soviet Union was promoting communism, and we were promoting, democratic capitalism. And both of us felt, the Soviets felt and we felt, that our position was strengthened by having more governments like us. We wanted more democratic, capitalistic, liberal governments in the world.
Yeah.
That strengthens us. The communists felt the opposite. They wanted more communist governments with centrally planned economies. That's better for everybody. So we had that ideology. But right now, I don't think China is interested in they do have a definite ideology. They do have definitely dogma they have very strong principles and ideology. But I think the way they think, that's for Chinese people. All right. We don't care how Africans run their government. We don't care if it's tribal. We don't care if it's democratic even. We just want their resources. We want their minerals.
Yeah.
And if we can make a deal with a democratic government, and rob a democratic government, we will do that. Because a lot of their deals are actually pretty extortionary with interest payments and loans.
Right.
They're like loan sharks. All right.
Yeah.
But they'll make a loan to anybody. They don't care. All right. What their local government is. Why should they? All they want is the minerals, because they view their world expansion as strengthening their economy and their society. They're not interested in promoting the Chinese way to other people, because quite frankly, other people can't do the Chinese way because they're not Chinese. And the same thing with Putin. Putin, yeah, he's got a definite ideology, but it's Russian nationalism. All right, and it's not communist. You know, the prelate of Moscow is totally on his side.
Yeah.
The Russian Orthodox Church supports him. They supported the invasion of the Ukraine. All right, so, but but Putin and all his disinformation and misinformation operations worldwide, they're not promoting Putin's way of government. They just want to destabilize, you know, because they view themselves as stronger when other governments are destabilized. Any kind of government,
Right.
all right? So that's actually a big change. So getting back, this is a way of answering your question.
Yeah.
Let's be specific to Africa. Are the Chinese promoting all these rebellions in China and so forth? I would
In
say
Africa.
no, unless one rebel group has promised them that they could have a mine
Yeah.
of something
Yeah.
when they take over,
Which may be happening.
which may be happening. You know, we have the blood diamonds, you know, we've had those for years,
Yeah.
and those are controlled by rebel groups.
Because they're getting weapons from somewhere, right?
They're getting, well, yeah, but that doesn't, yeah, but they pay for them too. It's a great
Yeah.
international. I mean, just because they're getting weapons from somewhere doesn't mean somebody's giving it to
So
them for free.
how does that
I think a
work?
lot of times they pay for it.
Yeah. How does international arms trafficking work like that?
Well, you have a black market in weapons that's been there forever, and it's very
Yeah.
highly developed. All right, and it's all for money. If anybody who's got the money can buy whatever they want.
Yeah. But a lot of major arms dealers are supported by the intelligence agencies of major nations, right?
Some of them are. I mean, the Russians are famous for that. There was
Yeah.
a famous Russian arms dealer that we actually jailed,
And
and
just
we
released, I think,
actually
right?
released him in
Yeah.
exchange for one of the prisoner
I think
release.
for Brittany Griner, for the WNBA player.
I don't remember.
Yeah.
But and but this guy was a
Yeah, it
uh
was Victor
real
Boot, I think, right? There was a movie about him called I think Nicolas Cage played him in a
yeah.
movie, right?
So he's the kind of guy you're talking about. He
Yeah.
he was an arms dealer, but he was close to Putin actually,
Yeah.
and he was collaborating with Russian intelligence.
So,
But I wouldn't say all arms dealers are.
yeah. Yeah. And you would know.
No, I don't know. I don't know all the arms dealers.
Well, you don't know all of them, but
I
you have an awareness
I
of
have
some
an
of them,
I have an
right?
aware. I have a great imagination.
Yeah. So you would say that today, unlike in the Cold War, which was driven by ideology, today it seems like um, conflict is driven just by raw geopolitical interest.
Yeah, as opposed to ideology. Yes, I would say that as an observation. Yes.
Yeah. So much more traditional. It's just money and power now.
Yeah.
And how do you see conflict evolving from where we are now? We're not in World War III, you would say, but we are definitely in a Cold War. One of the characteristics of that Cold War is a significant proxy war. Would you call Ukraine a proxy war?
The Russians do.
Yeah.
The Russians definitely call it a proxy war.
Yeah.
Uh, I don't think so because look at our performance. You know, we are, sometimes we say we're going to help the Ukraine and then we change our minds and we don't help them. And this actually is um um bipartisan because Obama, a Democrat, was president in 2014, and he did not give the Ukraine the help that they should have had, that we were bound by treaty to give.
Yeah.
All right. So now Biden came in, and he actually was much more, energetic than Obama or the first Trump administration, and he actually created an alliance or helped. I don't want to say create. He facilitated. Let me use that word. He facilitated an alliance, helped to organize a European alliance against Russia, which I think the Europeans wanted to do, and they were hungry to do it.
Yeah.
Um, and I think it was effective. I think that because of the foreign help that the Ukrainians received, they were able to push back the Russians. Initially, everybody thought Kiev would fall in 3 days, if you remember that.
Yeah.
And then everybody thought, well, we were going to help the Ukrainians, but we're going to make them Afghans.
Right.
The Ukrainians, we're going to give them Stingers and
Yeah.
that kind
Stingers and
of,
javelins.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, those types of weapons, guerrilla weapons. Because what we envisioned was a guerrilla war in the Ukraine against the Russians. That's what we envisioned initially.
Yeah.
Not just we, I think the West. And I think everybody was surprised about the tremendous resistance that the Ukrainians put up, conventional, and the incompetence of the Russian army. All right, so they stopped them in their tracks. The Russians didn't take Kiev and pushed them back. And then we got into something else I don't think a lot of people envisioned: World War I type trench warfare with static defenses and tanks and infantry, like kind of like World War I. With a big difference that now you got drones flying overhead, shooting people.
Yeah.
Um, the the war, I think, would have gone a lot better for the Ukrainians had we been more decisive about giving them the weapon systems that they needed when they asked for it. I mean, the long range missiles, we took forever to give it to them. We thought about it. And then, and at the heart of the issue was what, in my mind, was pusillanimity. Oh, we don't want to escalate. We don't want to escalate. Well, Putin escalates whenever he feels like it. He bombs hospitals, bombs maternity wards, bombs civilian apartment buildings. I mean, kidnaps
Right.
children. At the international court again. One of our Given the other theme, the dismissal of international law across the board. There's so many examples. The international court has issued an arrest warrant for Trump. Excuse me, for oh wow, for, oh my God, you gotta delete that. For the international,
We might
can
just
you
leave that
imagine that
in.
little soundbite?
That's a little
Uh,
Freudian slip right there.
the international court has issued an arrest warrant for Putin. Putin.
Yeah. Yeah.
Listen, everybody, listen up. Putin. Um, for kidnapping Ukrainian children, thousands of Ukrainian children. They've issued an arrest warrant. All right, which of course he's blown off. All right, so the Ukrainians have been asking for all these weapons, but during the Biden administration, they actually did get a lot.
Yeah.
But there's a big delay with the F-16s. They wanted F-16s. We took a year to make up our minds. They finally got them. The long range missiles, we took forever to make up our minds. They finally got them. I think there were some tanks they wanted. They finally got them.
Yeah.
But the problem is, you can't fight a war this way. I mean, to me, when I look at the history of war, the people that win are decisive. You take advantage. There's so many battles that I've read about that the one who wins is the guy who rapidly took advantage of a certain situation.
Yeah.
I like,
Well, that's an interesting question because, I mean, does the West want Ukraine to win? And I guess maybe not the West, but the United States in particular. Do we want Ukraine to win, or do we want to exhaust Russia in Ukraine so that they can't fight anywhere else?
I don't think we're concerned about the Ukraine fighting anywhere else. I mean, I think
No, so Russia can't fight anywhere else.
well, so Russia can't fight anywhere. No,
Yeah,
I, I don't, I don't think we're that
you
deep.
don't think so? Okay.
I mean, what I think is that the Biden administration generally was concerned about escalating. I mean, I think
Yeah,
they really believed it. They weren't kidding. All right, they didn't want to escalate. Now,
yeah,
my judgment is they're wrong. all right? Because I think Putin only respects strength.
Yeah.
And I
I
think,
think Jake Sullivan has said that he pushed for more weapons sooner to Ukraine, and Biden didn't wanna do that because he was concerned about escalation
yeah,
further,
they're
you
all,
know?
and then some
Mm,
of the Russian
mm.
oligarchs that have, emigrated to the West and get interviewed, people close to Putin. The ones that didn't fall out of windows or fall out of yachts and drowns or fall down steps and break their necks. I mean, Russian oligarchs just seem to really have a balance problem. I don't
It's a
know if
tough
it's
gig, you know?
genetics or
Yeah,
what, but these
yeah,
guys keep falling out of buildings just all the time. But
yeah.
those who have a good sense of balance and made it to the West without falling, uh, they unanimously say there is no red lines. The red lines are in your heads. Now, does he threaten? Sure, he threatens
What do
because
they mean by that? What do they mean by that?
that what they mean by that is what we have in our heads is if we, for example, give them long range missiles
Right,
and then the Ukrainians shoot up some military base deep inside Russia with their long range missile, some supply depot for the war against the Ukraine. If they do that inside Russia, then Russia will start a nuclear war.
right.
Russia will respond with tactical nuclear weapons, which Putin's threatening all the time.
Yeah.
All right. But the question is, are you going to accept the threats of a bully? All right. Or not?
And
And
so that's it. The red lines are all, k around built around threat of nuclear war.
well, not only nuclear war, but other forms of escalation. Putin's threats don't necessarily have to be just nuclear war because he's already doing other stuff, talking about instability. Part of your instability theme,
Yeah,
the other dimension of it is they're cutting undersea cables, the
yeah.
Russians. All
Mhm.
right. That's really threatening to the world order. I mean, if they decided to do this, they just do a few to show they can do it and to
Yeah,
harass. But if they wanted to, they could institute a campaign of systematic destruction of undersea cables
yeah.
to really cause an impact. All right. Now they haven't done that. But see, that's another fear of escalation. If we uh do
And
something
a
that they
lot of
find very threatening,
international
will they respond and do something really threatening?
yeah, and
Like
important to
cutting
note that
undersea
a lot
cables.
of, international web traffic flows through undersea cables.
Right. They've already cut some.
Yeah.
And that is like, hey, here's what we can do.
Yeah, I think
So
they cut some cables to, was it Africa?
I don't know. I know they did in the
I think it was,
Baltic.
like, Africa or the Middle East.
Africa? No, they did it in the Baltic Sea. The Baltic Sea is the most troubling because that's connecting Europe.
Yeah.
No, why would they do Africa? It doesn't make any sense.
Um,
They're all over Africa trying to establish friendly
it was
government.
in the Red Sea. That's where it
The
was, in the
Red
Red Sea.
Sea.
Yeah. So it was between Africa and the Middle East, I guess.
So that's another form of fear of escalation.
Yeah.
But because of that, I think that helped create the impasse we have now. Now it helped create the stalemate that we have now, where the Ukrainians will be hard pressed to drive the Russians out. Now, speaking of the gray warfare and all that, the Russians got a tremendous propaganda campaign saying that, victory is inevitable for them because of all their resources and their greater manpower and all that. And it's been very effective. A lot of US politicians actually buy into it, um, including those who don't want to give aid to the Ukraine. See, we play a key role in what's going to happen. If
Yeah.
we pull away from the Ukraine, I think they are going to be hard pressed to I don't know if winning is even a word that we can use, but it make things a lot more difficult for the Ukrainians. Let me put it
Yeah.
that way.
Yeah.
If we withdraw aid, like we have already periodically, and this will definitely favor Russia if
Yeah.
we do that. Now, part of the reason that we're at that stage is because the Russian propaganda operation is convincing. And you hear American politicians repeating basically the Russian propaganda line. The Ukraine can't win. Uh, Now, there is another propaganda line, the Ukrainian propaganda line, which is Russia can't win. All right. Now, it's more than propaganda. They do have some elements of reality that they can point to, like why does Putin need North Korean troops if he's doing so well, and if the Russians are have all the manpower they need, why do you need North Korean troops in the front? Why do
Yeah.
you need to get drones from Iran? Really? The great power Russia is getting drones from Iran? What does that mean? You don't have enough of your own,
Yeah.
and so
And the
forth.
war has been almost in a stalemate for, you know, what, 3 years now?
3 years.
Almost 3 years.
3 years. So I think the Ukrainians could argue, well, if
And
we
been
just
going
had the
on for four
resources
years
that we need,
almost.
and we had the support we need, we would be doing a lot better.
Right. Right. Yeah. See, I don't think we want the Ukrainians to be doing a lot better.
I don't I don't I just can't understand why what is it? Or what I think what concerns us is that we still have that fear of Russia.
Yeah.
Is
I
that
think we also have a fear of regime collapse in Russia.
maybe I don't know. I have a lot of people have said, "Be careful what you wish for. You get rid of
Yeah.
might get somebody worse." Sure.
Yeah.
Which
Well,
which I
somebody worse or just complete chaos in the world, the nation with the world's second largest nuclear arsenal.
well, maybe that's part of the equation. On the other hand, the way the Europeans see it is the Russian, and then getting back to the central theme, the failure of international law nowadays.
Yeah.
Russia violated international law. In my mind, there's just no question. They have no justification for invading the Ukraine. Now, Putin talks about history and culture and all kinds of things, and he's upset about the expansion of NATO. He's got all kinds of excuses. But at the end of the day, we had established a rules-based society and a rules-based, order, which is you don't change borders violently. You don't invade. It's just simple. It's easy. It's not difficult. You can't invade foreign countries. The
Right.
19th century is over. All the centuries are over. We're in the modern world. And he's acting like Genghis Khan. No, I'm going to invade the Ukraine because I think I deserve it. The Russia deserves it. Well, that's what you think. The Ukrainians obviously don't think that because they've been fighting you for 3 years.
Yeah.
All right. And what the fear of the Europeans is, if they allow the Ukraine to go under, they're next. Because Putin will always have an excuse to have a pick a fight with his the people on his borders.
Yeah.
I mean, they're already overflying Polish airspace. All right,
Yeah. Yeah.
and they're already they're blowing up railroads
Yeah.
in Europe.
Yeah.
They're
I
doing
think,
active sabotage in Europe already.
yeah. Also worth noting that Russia is geographically a very vulnerable state. And so that impulse to expand has kind of been with Russian leaders going back centuries, right? I think Catherine the Great said, like, I don't know if someone said, uh, something
Well,
about Russia is either expanding or, dying or something.
well, the corollary to that is that if you look at Russian history, they've suffered a lot of invasions. The Mongol invasions, but a lot of people have invaded Russia over the centuries. The
Yeah.
Swedes invaded Russia at one time,
Right. Right.
all
Yeah.
right? The Poles invaded part of Russia.
Everyone invades Russia.
Everybody
Yeah.
invades Russia, all right? Now they all get driven out eventually. Napoleon, the French invaded Russia.
Yeah.
France invaded Russia.
Yeah.
And then the Germans, even when they had a treaty with Stalin, they couldn't help themselves. They had to invade Russia too.
Yeah.
So,
So Russian leaders are deeply
well, not
paranoid
just it's
about
the Russian
invasion.
people and Russian culture because that's something we don't have, Americans. We really haven't been invaded by anybody. All
Yeah.
right, we've been the invaders. All
Yeah.
right, and the attack on the building in New York City that doesn't count. All right, as an
Yeah.
invasion, and
Yeah.
neither Pearl Harbor. They
Right.
blew up the harbor and then flew away. But
Right.
an actual invasion where you got Russian troops, the Russians have experienced that over and over in their history. So I think that gives them a certain mindset that we don't have. And I think that's part of the equation. You know, why would you do something as unmodern as invading the Ukraine?
Yeah. So do you think Putin is, I think if you watch kind of Western media, it's all Putin's crazy, he's unhinged, da 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 da. I
Well,
think
I
you
don't
can
think that
definitely
at all.
call his invasion of Ukraine a miscalculation,
Oh, it's a
but
miscalculation, but that doesn't mean he's unhinged. No, he just
right,
everybody makes mistakes. He made a mistake.
right, right. But from his perspective, he's doing something that is in Russia's national interest.
Well, obviously,
Yeah.
of
Well,
course.
not obviously, because everyone, if you tune into like CNN or MSNBC or Fox News, I think it's all, Putin's crazy. He doesn't know what he's doing.
Oh
He's
no,
evil,
that's
da 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 da
that's
da. But
that's
this goes back to your point originally about understanding your adversary's
well, yeah.
perspective,
Yes.
right?
I mean, I think I understand the Russian, you know, reason for invading Ukraine and the emotion behind it because it's not all rational. There's a lot of emotion.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean I agree with it because the Ukrainians have their own reasons and their own emotions for resisting.
Yeah.
All right. And actually, they just mentioned that, the new peace plan that came out, the original version, because now they keep changing it, was actually very favorable to Russia. All right. Initially,
Yeah.
you know,
The initial one that came out like 3 or 4 days ago
yeah.
and that was translated from the original Russian.
Yeah. Well, that's what's been said. I, I don't know if that's true, but
Yeah. I don't know.
but it was very favorable to Russia.
Yeah.
And the Ukrainians are outraged. I mean, Ukraine had to give up territory, decrease the size of its army,
Yeah.
and never join NATO. All
Right.
right. This is everything Russia wants. So what do the Ukrainians get? Well, your hospitals and schools won't get bombed anymore. Your
Right.
apartment buildings with
We'll stop
civilians
killing
won't
you.
get bombed.
Yeah.
Now that the
For
way
now.
the Ukrainians doing it, what Putin is doing is state-sponsored terrorism, quite frankly, because shooting missiles at an apartment building, how does that affect the war effort?
Yeah.
All right. I mean, even with the jihadist guy that I talked to, I don't think he would say, "No, wait a minute, that's going, that's too much."
Yeah.
That because you know why? Because it doesn't really help you win. You're just doing terror for the sake of terror.
Yeah. Yeah.
When you are sending missiles into an apartment building,
Yeah.
all right? When you
Yeah.
could have so many other targets you can shoot at. Why don't they shoot at the National Palace? Why don't they blow up the National Palace?
Right.
There's
Right.
other targets that you can shoot that would
Yeah.
be more justifiable as part of a war.
Yeah. It definitely increases suffering and, you know, uh, makes life a lot harder in Ukraine.
Well, they call that terrorism. They
Right.
consider Putin not only a kidnapper of children,
Right.
all right, with an arrest warrant, but also using terrorist tactics in their country. Now,
Yeah.
I've got, some friends who don't wanna help the Ukraine. They say, "Well, the Ukrainians are doing the same thing to the Russians." No, they're not. They're really not. The
Right.
Ukrainians are not targeting apartment buildings, with civilians sleeping in them at night. They're not doing it. It just isn't
Yeah.
true. The
Yeah.
Ukrainians actually are doing it the right way. They're targeting supply depots, military bases, military targets. It's not the same. They're not equal. And that's the central division of opinion between the Europeans and the Ukrainians and us. Our whole position in the last couple of years has been both sides are equally guilty. That's
Our
we
position?
our
Uh,
position, the
the,
US position,
yeah.
the US position for the last
Yeah.
few years has been both sides are equally guilty. Well, the Europeans don't see it that way.
Yeah.
You
Well,
know,
I think
the
only the
Europeans
Trump
say Russia is
administration
guilty.
maybe has seen it that way. And the Trump administration, but the Biden administration, I don't think saw it as both sides are equally guilty.
Well, when I said the last few years, that's what
Yeah.
I meant.
He's only been there for a few months. He hasn't even been there for a year, Arturo.
It seems like
It seems like a
it
little bit longer.
seems
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
it seems
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
all right, okay, I
You
stand
know,
corrected. The last year. All right, good point. You everybody out there in at the podcast land,
yeah.
listen up. The last year.
Well, but not even that, because I mean, there have been times during that when we've been, at least what you see in the press is a high degree of support and support for Ukraine and collegiality between Trump and Zelensky and the Europeans, right? They had
Well,
the
it
meeting.
goes up and down. It goes
It
up
goes
and
up and down. Yeah,
but from the point of view of waging a war and creating a foreign policy and maintaining alliances, that up and down isn't good.
right.
All right, you need some stability, you need some certainty. And
It's helpful.
what we're
Yeah,
a lot of European leaders have already said, we can't trust the US anymore.
right.
All right, because yeah, next week it can be up. The week after that it can be down. That's not the
Yeah,
way you maintain an alliance.
yeah.
And they're actually looking, for strengthening themselves and lessening their dependence on us.
But the United States is still the biggest game in town.
We're still the biggest game in town, and they are at a big disadvantage. I mean, they have, I have a lot of, friends who deal with Europe and know Europe, but I have friends who are Europeans, and they say, that's just talk. They just don't have the infrastructure to do it, to do what they say they're going to do.
Right.
Right now, they don't have the infrastructure, they don't have the resources, they don't have the know-how
Yeah.
to
And
to
even they are increasing their defense budgets, but they still don't have the capabilities that the United States has.
they're increasing their defense budgets, which I think is a good thing. I mean, I think that's been a positive. I think every American president has been complaining that
Yeah.
the Europeans weren't paying enough,
Yeah. I mean, give credit where credit's due. Trump got it done.
which
Yeah.
I agree. I think that's a legitimate complaint, and Trump got it done, so good for him
Yeah.
in that
And
respect.
now, okay, there's a peace plan on the table that's
Well, we don't know because as we speak, they're working on it.
that's right. That's right. But it's there, right? It's being negotiated.
It's being negotiated, and the European statement that I saw when they met in Johannesburg and they looked at the first draft was, "This needs work."
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
that's a direct quote.
Yeah. Well, I think a lot of senators and uh, congressional representatives, but like Republicans and Democrats have said that it's not an acceptable peace plan. Also,
Well, good. So, yeah, work on it. Yeah, negotiate, sure, do it.
yeah, yeah,
But in my way of thinking, like a lot of the guerrillas, the guerrilla my experience has actually been a lot with guerrillas, all right? And
not gorillas.
guerrillas,
Yeah,
guerrilleros,
yeah,
all right? And, the common phrase is fight and talk.
uh huh,
Fight and talk or negotiate. Fight and negotiate
yeah.
simultaneously, which is what I
Well,
think we should be doing.
yeah.
But
So we have two major peace plans on the table
we are
right
not
now. We
giving
have
the Ukrainians, as far as I know, the weapons and resources that they need to really step up the fight.
yeah, yeah.
And
Well,
and
so
and
that
you said your thing about the 1 year, but the first Trump presidency, I think they were kind of ambivalent about the Ukraine too. Think about it.
like overtly, yeah, but that's how all the Ukrainians got all the javelins and the stingers and all their weapons and training was from the first Trump administration. I
Yes.
think most of that was like, you know, because of Madison, John Kelly, and what they were doing. But it was the first Trump administration that originally armed Ukraine, I think, right?
Yeah, because Obama wouldn't do it.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, okay, give him credit where credit is due.
And then they invaded, you know, the first month Biden was in office, right? Or no, second year Biden was in office, 2022.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, so uh, right now, as things stand, there are two major peace plans on the table, one for Ukraine, one in the Middle East, and what uh, for Israel, the conflict between Israel and Gaza and the Palestinians, and what prospects for success do you give those peace plans? And they're both very different, but I'm
Well,
wondering if are we at an inflection point where there's an off ramp to kind of the disorder that's been increasing?
no,
No.
because I can't see the Ukraine and Russia agreeing on a peace plan that satisfies both of their objectives.
Okay.
So I think the only purpose of continuing with the peace negotiations is to get to a point where the Ukraine says, "Yeah, okay, we'll do it," and then Russia says no. And then finally, we could side with the Ukraine and
Yeah.
finally give them, the help they need to win. All right. Because Russia I think they think time is on their side. I think they have just complete contempt for our form of government and the West and Western Europe as well.
Is time on Russia's side?
Is time on Putin's side?
Yeah.
Um, maybe. Because he's doing a war of attrition in the Ukraine. I mean, he's bombing the electrical infrastructure. I mean, he wants people to freeze. Winter's coming, so what's he doing? Bombing the electric. I mean, the guy's a real terrorist.
Yeah.
All right, and he's bombing the infrastructure because he wants the civilians to freeze.
Yeah.
And
He's been
when
doing that for 4 years.
he's continuing to do it.
Yeah.
And actually, we had a program. AID had a program to rebuild the electrical infrastructure. So then we suspended that.
Yeah.
So we are not giving money to rebuild what the Russians are destroying purposely.
Right. Right. Yeah.
So in that sense, we're kind of siding with the Russians. Um, because you know, I think our position is, hey, Ukraine, give up some territory, to end the war. So you lost a piece of territory. It happens all over the world. People lose territory.
Yeah.
I mean, Eritrea used to be part of Ethiopia. It broke away. Now it's not. Ethiopia doesn't have Eritrea anymore. It used to, but now it doesn't.
Yeah.
And there's so many other examples all over the world where countries lose part of their territory. So you just
Right.
lost part of your territory.
Well, yeah. So do you think this war just ends in a state of armistice the way
But the
the
way the
Korean War
Korean
did?
War ended, maybe,
Yeah.
maybe just to, I mean, actually, that's a good, projection. That was another word, not projection, but the scenario, the
Yeah.
armistice in Korea, where the sides don't agree that the war is over, but they stop fighting, and
Yeah.
then it's a way for Russia to keep everything they took, and it's a way for the Ukrainians to stop getting bombed,
Yeah. Yeah.
and then the Ukraine will just have to suck it up and say, well, we lost the Crimea and we lost part of Donbass, so that's the way the world works.
But within that context, let's say there is armistice in Ukraine, you think that happens in an environment where um, international law, international systems, international order continues to erode?
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
if your armistice scenario pans out, okay, which
I get it.
I can see
Yeah,
it, okay,
yeah,
especially if we continue to withhold the aid from the Ukraine that they need, and the Western Europe's incapable of doing it, all right? Um, it will definitely damage international law more than it already has been,
yeah,
all right? Because it's like I said, it's already damaged because the International Court of Arbitration has an arrest warrant for Putin, but nobody expects him to ever be arrested.
yeah,
So then why even have an International Court of Arbitration? All right. Then on the other side of the world, China. The International Court said, no, you can't do what you're doing in the South China Sea. China says, I don't recognize your authority. I'm not leaving. We're not changing anything.
yeah,
So what's the point of international law?
yeah. I think so. A colleague of yours at FPRI, Robert Kaplan, says that we're in a period of a return to empires where it's not international law and political borders that defines that's the emphasis of sovereignty, but it's um a return to geographical empire that's based on geography, and then jockeying and kind of international conflict, the way we're seeing it now, that becomes the norm.
Well, I think that's happening.
Yeah,
And actually another point to bring up in terms of the Cold War, the differences between this war and the previous Cold War that we had is multipolar. And in a way that before it was really the Soviet, the free world and the Soviet Union,
yeah,
right? And that existed for decades. And our strategy was one of containment. We wanted to stop the spread of communist governments.
yeah,
And that's when we had a lot of proxy wars. All right. Where the in a certain sense, the Cold War was a big success for mankind because the United States, the free world and Russia never went to war directly.
yeah. Well, we never launched nuclear missiles at
And we
each other.
never launched nuclear missiles, and we
Yeah,
never went to war directly. The Russians and Americans never fought.
yeah,
Now, the Afghans rose up against the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan, and we helped the Afghans. All right.
yeah, yeah.
So you could say the Afghans were our proxies.
Right,
The
and they
Afghans,
help the
the Afghans
Vietnamese.
wouldn't say that, but we can say it. We gave
Yeah,
them stingers and so forth.
yeah,
All right. By the way, I had a conversation with some Taliban commanders, and they said, we don't understand why you guys turned against us. And I said, but 9/11, Bin Laden. They said, he's not an Afghan, and we had nothing to do with 9/11. We didn't even know about it, which is true. And
yeah,
and then he said, and the alliance you guys made with the Northern Alliance with the Tajiks, bunch of they always say thieves and rapists, like an epithet, the
right.
Northern Alliance, and these are the guys we linked up with. And they said, well, you should have linked up with us. We're the real Afghans, not them.
Didn't Bush give the Taliban an ultimatum to give up Osama bin Laden
Yeah,
and Al Qaeda?
yeah, but they couldn't do that because it's against Islamic law to give a uh, I actually
Right.
talked about that, and I said, "Well, why
Pashtun
don't you give
Wally.
them up? We can't do that."
Yeah.
And they said, "We would have," but here's what they said, what we would have done is we would have had a trial in Afghanistan, and then you bring the evidence.
Wow.
You bring the evidence that bin Laden attacked you and is responsible for, killing innocent people.
Yeah.
We will have a trial in Afghanistan, and if he's guilty, we'll behead him. All right.
Yeah.
Can you imagine the U.S. trusting an Afghan law?
Yeah.
Anyway,
Yeah. I think that
but but
probably.
but they're
Yeah.
thinking, well, why not? We're not savages. We have a civilization. We have
Yeah.
law. But the what was the thing I was saying? The what did I bring up? The Taliban.
Oh, man.
I brought up the Taliban to make a point. Now I forgot. about
Oh man, I wish. Okay, come on, we
the
gotta.
negotiations. Well, I forgot my point. And
Yeah,
so
return to empire and increasing disorder.
I totally forgot my point.
Yeah,
Keep going.
yeah. So I think we still have a lot of to discuss. And right now, I think you agree we're in a state of Cold War, and um, want to get your views on how things develop from there. But I think probably best to discuss that in part two of our conversation. Um, so Arturo, thank you so much for joining me for this first part, and I look forward to talking with you very soon.
Sure. Yeah, we'll do part two. And I'm going to try to work on my memory lapses. The aging process.
Hey, I'm right there with you. Yeah,
It's
yeah,
it's just frightening.
yeah. uh, the only thing we have to fear is fear itself, Arturo.
Yeah, I heard that somewhere.
Yeah. All right. Well, on that note, thank you so much. It's always a pleasure to talk to you.
All right, we'll see
Cheers.
you. Yeah, thanks.